Hello, my beloved, and welcome. My name is Jim Lee, and we are in for a treat today. We have a very dear friend of mine by the name of Leonard Simchak. He will be delivering the message. Just a little bit about Leonard. First of all, he's a TED Talk presenter and a psychotherapist, but I just want you to know he's basically an overall good guy. He's the real deal. Well, one of the things that Leonard does is he is an award-winning author, and he's written several books. And today, he is presenting one of his books, and the title of his book is also the title of today's lesson. It is Bob Cratchit's Christmas Carol. Now, this is a fascinating takeoff of Christmas Carol. However, is Bob Cratchit, who is having an eye-opening experience that's also very transformational for us as well. So you can get the wonderful book on Amazon, and I just want you to know that it's great for all ages. So enough of me talking about it. Now here is Leonard Simchak.
'Twas a night before Christmas. In Scrooge's counting house, Bob Cratchit was working, scared as a mouse. Now you're probably familiar with Charles Dickens's character Ebenezer Scrooge, that miserly lender who coined the phrase "bah humbug" whenever anyone wished him Merry Christmas. And you also probably know that he was visited by 3 Christmas ghosts who showed him his past, his present, and his future, to give him a wake-up call so that he could change from being a miser to a generous soul. What you probably don't know is that he wasn't the only person who met his fate on Christmas Eve. His woeful clerk, Bob Cratchit, also received visitations. He had his own Christmas carol. So join me as we visit a rundown part of London on Christmas Eve in 1841. And there, Bob Cratchit, wearing a tattered coat, scribbling on a ledger, is shivering in his tiny office, which is more like a prison cell. He's a small, unkempt man with black hair and mutton chop sideburns. He warms his hands by a sole candle at a scruffy desk. And in the larger office, Ebenezer Scrooge sits behind a dark mahogany desk, gleefully counting his gold coins. On Christmas Eve, Scrooge had already foreclosed on a destitute woman, took her home, and then also berated 2 men, Augustus Jingle and Albert Bell, who asked for money to feed the children. Scrooge gave them a lump of coal and threw them out. And after they left, Scrooge placed the coins in a drawer and locked it up. He told Bob, "I have one more debt to collect," he announced to Cratchit. "I'll give him a Christmas present he will never forget." "What would that be, Mr. Scrooge?" asked Bob, hoping beyond hope that there was a change of heart. "I'll charge him double interest this time." "Well, can I not wait, Mr. Scrooge? It is Christmas." "Bah, humbug," said Scrooge, walking toward the door. "And don't you dare leave today until you finish all your work." Well, Bob handed him his coat and top hat, and he says, "I hope it's not too much trouble, Mr. Scrooge, if I have Christmas off." And Scrooge stared at Bob's mutton chop sideburns as he put on his coat. "Every Christmas Eve you ask the same, and why should I pay you for work you've never done?" "Because it's Christmas." "Humbug," shouted Scrooge. "It means nothing to me. Make sure you finish all your work and come early after Christmas." He opened the door, stepped outside into the freezing cold, and said, "Bah, humbug." Now, after he left, Bob breathed a sigh of relief. Though he had to work late, he could do so in peace, away from the watchful eyes of a tyrant, a man he had worked for 20 long, hard years. He He warmed his hands over the candle and worked feverishly, stopping periodically to warm his hands. Bob hated working for Scrooge, and, if truth be told, he hated his life. Bob felt powerless to do anything except suffer and survive. Fear dominated his life. He was fearful of losing his job, fearful of working for Scrooge, fearful of falling into further debt, and fearful of losing his son, Tiny Tim, who desperately needed medical help. And Bob, he always put on a happy face for his family. He didn't want them to see how miserable he felt inside, but they really saw his broken spirit. And so on Christmas Eve, that Bob tried to finish the ledgers so he could make it home for Christmas and celebrate the family, he put his head on his desk to just rest and fell fast asleep. And then he felt a tap on his shoulder. He woke up and he recoiled in terror. Never before had he witnessed an apparition. And there before him was a tall, vivacious woman with ebony skin. She was dressed in a flowing red dress decorated with evergreen garlands. Little bells woven into her beaded black hair tinkled as she tapped Bob with a branch of fresh holly that smelled of pine. "I must be dreaming," said Bob. "Oh, you've been dreaming your whole life," she said. "My name is Angelica, and I've come to awaken you and take you to the past." No, I don't want to see the past," protested Bob. "Ah, I show you the past so you learn from it and then can let it go." "Well, how can I let go of so much pain?" asked Bob. Angelica nodded, causing the bells to tinkle once more. "You learn to survive, but you let the past stop you from living. Come, grab hold of the holly." Bob recoiled. Angelica leaned closer. "The light of Christmas dwells within, and when you walk through life asleep, you do not remember you are a child of God. And when awake, you birth the spirit of Christmas, and its light guides your way." Bob stammered, "Do I have a choice?" The spirit of Christmas past chuckled. "Of course you have a choice. You can choose to come willingly, or you can choose to come unwillingly. The choice is yours." He chose to come rather unwillingly, hoping he was but dreaming and would soon wake up. Bob was whisked back in time, and he saw himself as a 10-year-old boy selling old newspapers at the side of the road. His shoes and clothes had holes, and his father arrived with whiskey on his breath, and he smacked Bob's ear and said, "Grab your gear. Come with me. I have a job for you." And Bob told Angelica, "My father took me to the warehouse and sold me to the owner to make shoe polish. I grew up, but my life held only despair and darkness. I barely saw the light of day working for the owner who beat the boys constantly, mostly for fun. We feared the beatings." Bob hunched over. "You have to release the past," said Angelica. "Forgiveness is the only way." I can't forgive that man and all his evil, and I definitely cannot forgive my father." Angelica smiled. "Forgiveness is not about condoning their action. That man and your father are long gone, yet the pain lives in your heart, and the fear has kept you chained to Scrooge. Forgiveness asks you to release your mind from the prison that ensnares you. You cannot heal unless you change what's in your heart." If we pause the story there, I just want to ask you about some of the memories that may haunt you that stop you from living in the present. Sometimes those traumatic memories stop us from really living and being and embracing the spirit of Christmas. We may have feelings of not feeling good enough, not being worthy, or thinking small. I remember in my own life, my father left the family when I was young, and forgiveness was a way that I could actually witness the past, learn from it, bless it, and then let go. And I think as Angelica, the spirit of the past, is trying to suggests to us that when we let go of the past, we are more able to live fully in the present. And that takes us to the next part of the story with Bob. If Bob, in his old office, he heard the clock strike 8 and the apparition was gone. But then he witnessed Scrooge's office ablaze with light. He was frightened that Scrooge had arrived, and Bob timidly peered through the doorway. And standing on Scrooge's desk was a buxom, olive-skinned woman dressed in a luxurious green velvet robe with a collar and sleeves trimmed in white fur. Wearing a wreath of holly over her curly brown hair, she stood in bare feet, surrounded by brightly colored packages, cakes, puddings, fruits, delicacies, all over Scrooge's desk. Bob timidly approached. Are you the spirit of Christmas present? And the bawdy spirit, my dear, you can call me Noella. Know well that the presence of Christmas is meant to be lived every day. Well, Scrooge only gives me 1 day off for Christmas, said Bob. This is not about Scrooge. Come, witness the present. She offered a hand, and Bob asked, do I have a choice? Another hearty laugh escaped from the apparition. You know the answer. You can choose to come willingly, or you can choose to come unwillingly. The choice is yours. Her belly jiggled while she laughed. Then let's be done with this, sighed Bob. When the robust woman clutched his hand, Bob detected the smell of yummy gingerbread. He inhaled the fragrance. It was transporting him through a mist to a festive party, and people were dressed in fine evening garments, eating tasty hors d'oeuvres. Now they remained invisible, but Bob and Noella approached Scrooge's nephew standing near the fireplace. And there he was sipping a glass of brandy, and he was listening to the two well-dressed men, Albert Bell and Augustus Jingle. And Albert Bell said, Scrooge is a horrible man, just horrible. He refused to give us any funds to pay for the children. And the conversation grew quite heated as Scrooge's nephew tried to defend his uncle against Jingle and Bell. And Noella said, see how easily they forget the Christmas spirit? Bob said, well, I celebrate Christmas. And Noella said, you celebrate Christmas, but only 1 day. Christmas is meant to be celebrated every day. The jolly woman moved towards the well-dressed men complaining about Scrooge, and she rubbed her hands together. A shower of green glitter poured from her hands along with an aroma of gingerbread. The demeanor on their faces shifted as if they'd consumed glasses of fine punch. Smiling, Albert Bell pats Augustus Jingle on the shoulder. You know, Bob Cratchit works for Scrooge, and I know Bob is an honest man. If only he ran the business, we would all be better off. And then Albert Bell calls out to the crowd, let's sing a carol. And a woman began to play the piano, and the group sang the first Noel. And of course, Noella said, that is my favorite Christmas carol. Amazed by the man's demeanor, Bob said, you know, you as a spirit can do many things. But Noella tugged at Bob's ear, saying, did you not listen? The spirit of Christmas resides in you, just like me. Come, I must show you another scene. So she took Bob's hand and took him to another scene. And this time he was transported to his own 4-room house, a shabby little place where his wife lived, and there, although Bob had 6 children, only 5 of them were there. The children were decorating a tiny, spindly Christmas tree with paper ornaments, and in the kitchen, Bob's wife was cooking up a meal, but she was crying as she talked to her daughter. And she said, I feel so much for Bob. I failed him. He comes home so miserable. He tries to put on a happy face, but he's so miserable. I just don't know what to do. I'm beside myself. Now Bob said to the apparition, please, don't let my wife suffer. She suffers enough. And so Angelica said, well then, Noella said, you must learn to love more deeply. And as the old phrase says, love your neighbor as yourself, Bob, you must love yourself. And that means you must love to take care of yourself and love what you desire and begin to open your heart to love for others. You must even learn to love Ebenezer. Now, Bob never considered Ebenezer had a soul, and let alone someone who needed love, because Bob lived in a life of fear. And Noella said, whoever you encounter, and whenever you experience ignorance and fear, you have the elixir of love to make a change. She held his hand and put her other hand on his heart. Breathe in, for you must move through the obstacles that cloud your heart. You must remove those barriers that prevent you from receiving love. And Bob inhaled the scent of gingerbread. He felt a movement of love. And he was then transported back to his office. And let's pause there for a moment in this story. I think we all know the importance of feeling love. Bob couldn't feel love for Scrooge, yet Spirit advised him that Scrooge needed love. And I don't know about you, but sometimes in my life, particularly with the polarization in our country, sometimes I think of some of the politicians as Scrooge. And can I really love them like Noella asks Bob to love Scrooge? And I think for us to heal the separation, we do have to open our hearts, even to those we may disagree with or don't care for. But I think when we open our hearts and find some commonality, we're able to heal the separation and division and really experience the Christmas spirit of love. And with that, we go to the final part of the story. Because when the bell struck 9, Noella was gone. But in her place was a purple-robed figure holding a torch in her right hand. And the face was shrouded in a purple hood. And when Bob saw this figure, he screeched, "Are you the spirit of what is yet to come?" And the hooded head nodded and waved the torch at Bob. Smoke, the color of lavender, rose like a finger, signaling him to follow. "My frankincense will lift you to the future. Come." Not wanting to face the future, Bob blurted, "Do I have a choice?" Of course, the hooded head nodded. "You can choose to come willingly or unwillingly." And Bob already knew the answer. He inhaled the sweet, woody fragrance of frankincense with some added notes of citrus and spice, and as if he entered a church, he fell into a twirling vortex that took him forward. And coming to a dizzying stop, he collapsed on a polished wooden floor. And rising, he steadied himself and found himself in a stately residence, decorated with red and green baubles and silver tinsel. Was this amazing tree gracing the corner in a well-lit drawing room. There was a piano, and on the walls were pictures of angels. "Where am I?" asked Bob. And the purple-robed figure removed her hood, revealing a petite Asian woman with straight, shoulder-length violet hair dangling from her head. The woman said, "I am Uriella," and her right hand lifted the blazing torch, sending wisps of frankincense curling towards the ceiling. "I light the way of what may be." No sooner had the angelic figure spoken when children ran into the room, followed by their mother. Still remaining invisible, Bob listened to their vibrant voices. Tears streamed down his face. "How can that be? Has my wife married another man? Look, he arrives now." And Bob stared at a well-dressed man tiptoeing into the room so as not to disturb the singing. He barely recognized himself in splendid attire. Bob stuttered, "How can that be? Tiny Tim, the house, the splendor. What happened?" Uriella pointed to a torch. The future is lit by the fire of your heart's desires. When you listen to your heart and choose from that place of desire, the future responds. Neglect the wishes of your heart, the future responds accordingly. Are you telling me I can create a future like this? Asked Bob. The Asian woman waved her torch at the lavish scene. This is but one of many versions of the future. Your life is what your thoughts make it. What you experience in your tomorrow is the result of what you think today. You have countless choices. Connect with your heart and use your mind to create your future. Every day you have limitless choices. Think poverty? That is what you shall have. Think abundance, and it shall come. Is this the future? Asked Bob. Uriella brought the torch in front of her face, casting a shadow over Bob. To help you choose wisely, I must show you another future where you hide the light. The Asian woman blew into the torch, sending a puff of frankincense into the air. The scene vanished, and Bob twirled forward in a circular fashion. He witnessed other scenes, other horrible scenes, but the final one brought him to a snow-covered cemetery, the paupers section. "No," screamed Bob, "not here." The woman glided across the frigid ground and stopped before a great sight. Tiny Tim never reached his teens. The grieving father buried his face in his hands and wept. "No," he sobbed, "the pain is too great. Take me away." Uriella lowered the flickering torch into the grave next to his son, and then Bob raised his head, then wailed uncontrollably. The date of his own death was a mere 2 months after the passing of Tiny Tim. His knees sank to the snow. "Oh, Spirit," cried Bob, "I can't bear a future like this. Tell me, if I remember Christmas spirits, can I change the future? And if there be such things as miracles, I will believe in them." Bob sobbed, "I can change. I must change. I will awaken and learn from the past. I will listen to my heart's desires and live in the present with love in my heart for everyone, including Mr. Scrooge. I will choose wisely and fulfill my dreams and change this horrid future. Tiny Tim must live." The purple-robed figure placed a hand on Bob's shoulder and squeezed. Bob shut his eyes at a horrible future and pleaded, "Please, anything but this." He felt a jolt to his shoulders. Get up, shouted a voice. "I promise I'll change." "Wake up, you crazy fool." Bob's eyes bulged open. Before him stood Scrooge, his eyes blazing with fury. "You've fallen asleep, you lazy oaf," shouted Scrooge. He shook his clerk's shoulder. "I'll not pay you to sleep on my time. Just as well I checked on you. Come back tomorrow. You must work on Christmas." Bob's hand reached for his own face. He pinched his cheek. "Oh, I am alive." He gazed at Scrooge as if for the first time. "'Tis you, Ebenezer, isn't it?" Scrooge winced at being addressed by his first name. "You impudent fool! Have you been drinking?" Bob jumped to his feet. He realized the future could be changed. He was sure of it. He would let go of the past, open his heart to the presence of Christmas, create a healthy, prosperous future for his family. He would believe in miracles. Noticing his scowling employer, he wrapped his arms around him in a bear hug. "You're fired," said Scrooge. Bob recoiled. Fired? Without a job? Fear rushed over him. And then he thought, fear no more in my life. He said to his now former employer, "Ebenezer, I must live as if Christmas is today. I no longer work for you." Now, we're all faced with fear, and in this story, Bob had to come face to face with fear and choose the past, live in the present, or create his future. Now, I won't tell you the full ending, but let me just say that miracles do happen for Bob, and they happen for Scrooge and his family and Tiny Tim. And at the end, just like in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Tiny Tim does say, God bless everyone.